Hello, this is Mike Troop, the voice and creator of the Earth Collective serial drama podcast. You're listening to the BS Podcast Network. Come check us out. You can find us on Twitter at TEC Story.
Jumbo, everyone.
Harambe.
And welcome to another edition of the Magic Our Way podcast. Asante Sana, everyone. You're listening to the Magic Our Way podcast from New Orleans, Louisiana, in the United States of America. We are artistic buffs talking about Disney stuff, and this is the show in which every opinion is welcome. MagicOurWay.com is where you can find us. My name is Kevin.
And I'm Danny.
And on this show, we follow the Disney concept of edutainment, where we focus on your entertainment, and along the way, you just might learn a thing or two.
Hey.
And as always, to join in our discussion, we have our resident comic genius from ivorycomics.com, Mr. Eli Ivory. How you doing, Eli?
Oh, I'm doing good, guys, man. Good to hear you guys' voices again. Hope everybody's doing all right.
Awesome, man. Yeah, we're doing. And of course, somebody else that's doing, we have a resident travel agent from Magical Moments Vacations, the Shaggy TA, Lee Lastavica. How you doing, Lee?
Oh, good, man. Another week, another 2 inches of beard growth. How about you guys?
Oh, damn.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I got hair growing, but not my beard. We'll just leave it at that. You got me beat on that one, buddy.
Can't follow that.
But anyway, guys, look, you're in for a great show, regardless of that. We will be ending our series on Disney's relationship with New Orleans. And for this episode, we are talking about the Port Orleans Resort and take it all the way as far back as when there were two separate resorts called Port Orleans and Dixie Landing.
Yeah.
So this should be a great show talking about how it relates to New Orleans, the back history, awesome job with the back history. And of course, we involve our friend Keith, listener X, who's going to help us chat with this show. So
honestly, he helped put the show together. Yeah.
That's right.
So,
he did help put the show together.
Right. So this episode, we're going to learn all about Port Orleans. Next episode, we're going to learn a lot more about Dixie Landings. And just in this intro, we learned that Kevin doesn't believe in manscaping. So we're learning lots already.
A lot of education right up in there. A lot more to come from, guys. So look, enough of my jibber jabber. Let's go discuss some magic. Mohicans, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pride and a bit of sadness to announce that we have arrived at our final installment in our series of shows discussing Disney's relationship with New Orleans, our hometown. In episode 319, we discussed Walt's visits to New Orleans as well as Disneyland's New Orleans Square. In episode 320, we discussed New Orleans as a possible site for Walt Disney World as well as the never-built Lake Buena Vista New Orleans Square Resort. And in this episode, number 321, we discuss the existing Port Orleans Resort, both Riverside, formerly Dixie Landings, and French Quarter, formerly Port Orleans. As we have done in the previous two episodes, we bring back Listener X, a.k.a. Keith, to help us in this discussion. Where you at, Keith?
Hey, how's everyone doing out there?
Doing well, man. And I'm glad you answered that correctly, which is to not answer it. You know, a lot of people in New Orleans say, where you at? And then you can tell they're out of town when they actually answer where they're at. And that's like not the point. So
It's the way you get those shoes.
You're right. Exactly.
When I was in New Orleans, actually, I got asked that. So I know it's true.
Yes. Well, good. You can vouch for that.
If you're visiting New Orleans and somebody says, I bet you I can tell you where you got those shoes, don't take the bet.
Yeah.
I
got those shoes in New Orleans. That's the answer.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
You got your shoes in New Orleans on Bourbon Street or whatever. Yeah, it's some little tricky thing that they like to do, and they try and hustle people for money like that, especially tourists.
Yeah.
Well, something good to know for any Mohicans coming to town to visit us, right?
Yeah.
So, guys, look, I'm looking forward to the discussion, Keith, man. We're talking about Port Orleans Resort. Where would you like to start, sir? I'll turn it over to you.
Well, let's just do a really quick 2-second recap. So last we left, we were talking about planned Walt Disney World Hotel, kind of in the Walt Disney World Village area, kind of in the early 80s, the Lake Buena Vista New Orleans Square, as Kevin mentioned. So that obviously didn't happen, but what kind of happened in its place was the first moderate resort, which was the Caribbean Beach Resort.
You did kind of get it, though. You did kind of get it, Keith. It's just that you got it in the boardwalk area.
True. So, so we had a deluxe hotel opened up, and we had a moderate hotel open up as well. So obviously Disney knew that they had planned in the works the Disney MGM Studios. So they realized they needed more on-site hotels. So, as I mentioned before, so they were planning some new hotels. And as Disney says, a good idea never dies at Disney. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sure they were planning these new hotels, and they were kind of dusting off the old blueprints. And, Michael Eisner's team, I'm sure, looked at it and said, hey, maybe a New Orleans themed hotel would actually be a good idea. So the idea was greenlit, and the hotel, the Port Orleans was actually, it's actually Port Orleans, and it was actually Dixie Landings. So two separate hotels side by side next to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Port Orleans opening first, right? And then Dixie Landings came shortly after.
Right. So the Disney Port Orleans Resort opened on May 17th, 1991, and it was exquisitely themed to the real New Orleans famed French Quarter. And, we'll get into that in a minute or two. And it started off with 432 rooms, and it eventually expanded to 1,008 rooms after the other buildings opened sometime later.
Cool. All right. So, look, one thing. New Orleans. Keith, say New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Thank you. That's it. So go with that for the rest of the show.
Not New Orleans? You guys don't like when I say New Orleans?
Well, it's us being from here.
He texted us to say that the back of his neck just kept twitching whenever he would.
Okay. So you guys correct me if I say it wrong. So, then I'm going to start saying Port Orleans to drive you guys crazy. But Port Orleans? Is that how you guys say it?
No, here's the funny thing about that, and a lot of people say have issues with that because we call it New Orleans, but we say Orleans Avenue. We'll say Port Orleans and stuff like that. So it's really confusing to a bunch of people. But when we refer to the city, it's always New Orleans. So we figured we should make sure that you knew since you're learning about this as well, being an out of town.
Yep.
And everything.
Okay. But hey, I'm not going to go against the local. So
That's right, locals.
Right.
You're outnumbered.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So have any of you stayed at the Port Orleans or Port Orleans or whatever you want to call it?
I've stayed several times at Riverside. That's for a family of 5. It's the most affordable way to go if you want to just stick to one room. So that's what we always did in the past. Now I got bigger kids, so I don't want to squeeze onto that little trundle bed. But yeah, I like the resort myself. I mean, again, I know that you guys say, hey, you know what? We're from here. We're from New Orleans. We don't really need to. We want a different kind of atmosphere. But I'm not from New Orleans, so I like it. It's laid back, and it feels like home.
Sure. Eli stayed there.
Yeah. I was going to say, I stayed there. I'm from here. I went out there. I stayed there. I think it was a few years back, but it was a really cool laid back spot. I mean, like you said, they did pull some of the architecture from the downtown area, made it a little more neon colored, I'd say. But overall, like the pool area and the bars where I spent the most time, which was very cool. Cast members were really easygoing group. So yeah, it was like being at home, except more Long Island iced teas.
And let's face it, right, man? Us being from New Orleans, if we can take a bit of our home to Walt Disney World, I mean, that's like a win-win for us, right? Because I mean, our city is so special, we love it, and a lot of different character aspects of it. So it's great that we can take some of that and at least have a taste of it or a bit of it. Or a cleaner version of it down in Walt Disney World.
Yeah, it is nice to like walk down the street and not have to worry about tripping over somebody tap dancing with bottle caps underneath their shoes or something like that. I will give you that. It is a good look of home, and it's a very good, how do you say, resemblance of it. So you know what I mean? It's not like the overall look of it is this as if they just were like, hey, let's just throw some stuff together, throw some beads on a rail and call it Port Orleans.
Right.
That's not the case. Yeah.
That's my problem with it. It's New Orleans, but without any of the things that make New Orleans fun.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, where are the people on the balcony waiting for the beads? And no.
Well, it's a family park, though.
Well, that's part of our enjoyment's laughing at like the out of town tourists doing all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't want children growing beards at the age of 5 if they see some of the stuff that actually happens down here during that time. So the cleaner representation might be good to warm them up.
To give the listener some context here, during this time when all this stuff was opening, the three of us, me, Eli, and Danny, were in high school at this time.
Yeah.
In New Orleans, in our hometown. Yes. So we were witnessing all of this happening while we're youngins, for sure.
Well, one thing, Danny, going back to your point, is they should have put a little more theme into it. I mean, they kind of have the, the wrought iron, and there's a court jester kind of in the main lobby and images of gold doubloons and that kind of thing. But the buildings actually, like, they should have used New Orleans names. I mean, they kind of just really have building numbers, and it's kind of divided up between north and south. So it's kind of not really an original name for the buildings versus Dixie Landings, which we'll get into it when we get into the history in a little bit. But no really originality there. Like, you're in North Building 1. That's it. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of Blaine Kern stuff around the area to kind of give that Mardi Gras type impression. But no, I absolutely see what you're talking about. And again, I've never stayed there. I just remember visiting and being within the lobby and where we picked up Eli from that one time. I can't remember. But yeah, no, it's never been anything that kind of drew me in to want to stay. I mean, just again, when I go on vacation, I'm the opposite. I want to forget New Orleans. There's so many problems over here right now. My God, it's nice to go someplace and be like, oh, I'm in the tropics now in my mind.
How fun would it be to be in Building A, the bathhouse?
Right.
Yeah, it makes it easy to kind of keep up to say, hey, you're in a quadrant. I mean, yeah, if you were like, oh, look, you need to go on Royal Street and take a left on Dumaine, and then you'll find your hotel rooms. Like,
they could have put you in like third ward or something.
Third ward.
I don't know what kind of wards y'all got, but I know they got some kind of wards.
It's a ward.
Yeah, don't they have the street signs in and around? I mean, I'm not sure. I know that you're right about the building.
Yeah,
I think the street names are like Royal Square and like some other streets, but the buildings' names are just generic.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Keith, where are we going?
So Port Orleans and Dixie Landings actually have some really interesting backstories. Probably one of the more fascinating backstories of any Disney resort than I can actually think of.
Mm-hmm. More detailed than me, that's for sure. Like, there's so much detail on this thing, and how they just, I don't know. Like, I'm of course they made this backstory to fit the theme, but like they really. Like, someone got paid overtime for this backstory. he was on quarantine, and they were like, hey, you got nothing else to do, use your imagination.
Well, yeah, I like it when they give backstories to things. I mean, they really went all out. They gave backstories to the lobby, to the gift shop, to the restaurant, to the food court, to the pool area. There's not like...
There's a backstory to the boat dock.
Yes, everything has a backstory. It's so rich. It's hard to get into. I mean, I know we're going to try and summarize as best as we can, I suppose. But I mean, yeah, if there's a building there, there's a backstory behind why that building is there.
And do we know why that happened during this time? What else opened just previous to this resort? Do we remember opened during this time?
Well, this opened in 1991. The Grand Floridian and the, which I don't really think has a backstory.
It does.
And then
further back to that. Further back, 1989. What opened in 1989?
Well, Pleasure Island.
Pleasure Island, which is loaded with backstory. If you listen back to our previous show on Pleasure Island, we had a two-parter where we discussed pretty much every nook and cranny of that backstory there. It's crazy. So this is about the mindset, the time in Disney's company where that mindset was, we got to give a story to everything. And so this resort was not excluded from that. It was definitely all up in that.
And at the same time frame, in 1994 was the Wilderness Lodge, and that has a little bit of a backstory. But then the Boardwalk and the Yacht and Beach Club, they really don't. So maybe it was just the Imagineers who were working on these hotels at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and also those places were DVC resorts, so they were looking to quickly expand on that particular property, given the original success of the old Key West venture. So those probably had a different kind of mindset going into it versus the other ones that, like the one we're about to discuss, that maybe have like more story behind it as well.
Well, to Keith's point, like the backstory was communicated because each of these resorts used to have their own newspaper. And that's how the resorts would put out the backstory behind how this resort came to be, what this building was about. All that stuff came through these newspapers. I think they stopped doing that.
Yeah, I mean, once it kind of went with the, they kind of cut out the backstory and kind of just made it like basic services, like here's the hours of the gift shop and all this, and then to your point, then the backstory basically got lost.
Yeah, when some bean counter somewhere went like, wait a minute, we're just going to change all this stuff anyway. What does it matter?
Right, yeah.
What a shame.
So why don't we get into the backstory a little bit? So the Port Orleans backstory, I kind of tried to do cliff notes because, like you guys said, the history is so kind of in detail. But actually, the backstory was originally published in the newspaper that was given out to guests called the Pascagoula Sentinel. Nice. And they actually kind of broke it out by year, going to when Port Orleans was founded, and then over time developed the city. So I kind of just did some really quick cliff notes, not to kind of turn this into like a boring history lesson, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
History, I love history, especially when it comes to the park. So I love to learn. But yeah, no, for the benefit of not being here for the next 6 hours, though.
Right. So apparently it all started in 1694. So there was a French expedition which set sail for America looking for riches. So Pierre d'Or.
Riches or bitches?
Riches.
Oh, okay.
That's how you get to bitches.
Yeah.
You're putting the cart before the horse there, Lee.
Yeah.
All right.
Scarface? You ever seen Scarface?
Lesson learned.
So it was. So there's a French expedition. It was by Pierre d'Or and Philip Wien. So you combine them together. You take the Or and the Wiens, and then there you get the Port Orleans.
Aha!
Cute.
Oh, so that's how I came up with the name. Yeah. So fast forward a couple years, and in 1704, the explorers. So apparently, I guess for 10 years, they've been kind of just wandering America. And then they sailed up the Pascagoula Delta in 1704, and they found land which they claimed for France. And this is how the city of Port Orleans was founded.
Okay, now you make sure you let them know, Keith. Pascagoula. Where does that word come from? Because Pascagoula River is obviously their version of the Mississippi River. So Pascagoula. Do you want to tell them what the word means?
Is that the French version of?
No, it's an Indian word.
Yes.
Okay.
We talked about it in the first episode, and I lost it in my note.
But in case you didn't listen to the first episode, it means
it's a Native American name for the Mississippi River.
Thank you, Danny, for that little history lesson.
Yeah, that's how they came up with the name of the river. Don't ask me why they didn't want to use the Mississippi or the name New Orleans or anything like that. They did their own thing.
It sounds more fancy than, I guess, the Mississippi. You know, it goes with the Sentinel, Pascagoula Sentinel, I guess. Mm-hmm. Mississippi Sentinel doesn't sound good. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, if Disney gets it wrong, then they don't have to be held accountable for anything because it's like their story, right?
Right. So they founded the city of Port Orleans, and having them being French, explorers, the city was laid out in the style of New Orleans with courtyard squares and elaborate French-influenced design similar to the French Quarter that you guys kind of know today. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how they kind of set up the backstory because they were French explorers, and that's kind of how the city, kind of got laid out. So then kind of like Danny said, I kind of liked to kind of just talk about specific areas that are in the Port Orleans resort, unless you guys just want to go into every single detail of the backstory.
Let's bounce around a little bit. Let's kind of ground it in a sense of reality and kind of explain where different things came from. The only reason you need the backstory is kind of lay out who these people that we're about to mention are, I would suppose.
Correct. So, yeah, I mean, they talked about how they the history goes into how they when they developed a bank and all this, but it was just almost year by year history. And I kind of, like Danny just said, I kind of like where they start talking about people and how they tie into stuff this building is related to this person who kind of lived in Port Orleans at this time. So why don't we kind of jump into that kind of a little bit?
Let's jump.
All right.
Jump.
So the first person is Jean Michael Desert. And this was a self-made man who used to sell sweets. And he married an actress named Maria Garcia Jackson.
What a name.
There's like a lot of nationalities in there.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be some cool French, Maria Laveau or something like that. Just Garcia Jackson. Hey, man, that's a girl from around the corner. All right.
Right.
That kind of fits.
You call her Miss Jackson if you're nasty, E.
That's right. Miss Jackson if you're nasty.
That's what you get the riches for. There you go.
Well, I think the idea behind including the Garcia, and because at some point in time in the backstory, they do make mention that the French territory was kind of taken over by Spanish settlers.
Correct. Yep.
Something like that. So they were trying to give you the sense that this was a unique culture that was being created on the fly here, where you have these French settlers intermixing with Spanish settlers, and now the blending of culture is leading to this brand new food and architecture and that kind of thing. And so I think that's why the attempt, like you have these outrageous names like Pierre Poupon. you can't get any more French.
Right.
Pierre Poupon.
Can you pass me the mustard, please?
Can you see him rolling up in a steamboat? Pardon me. Do you have any great Poupon?
Well, guys, just to kind of relate it to the actual city itself, that's actually what happened in the city of New Orleans. We were under the French flag and then the Spanish flag and then the American flag. Mm-hmm. Back to all kind of cultures in this, what the nation refers to as a gumbo of peoples. So, yes. That's very parallels the story of what we're actually living.
And that is true of the culture. It was just like, I was expecting a more fancy name. Like all the other people had the fancy names, and then here comes Miss Jackson.
Garcia Jackson, though, man.
Yeah, Maria Garcia Jackson.
She married a Jackson.
She married into the Jacksons.
Garcia Conchita Alonso, and then she married Nathaniel Jackson.
Thomas Jackson. Nathaniel Jackson. That's it.
Well, wait till you hear the daughters' names.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, we got daughters. Oh,
so they had two twin daughters, and they were named. And I'm probably going to destroy the pronunciation, but it's Celia. So Celia and Delia.
Delia.
Monique, you need.
Ophelia.
Where's my
cake,
Ophelia?
Yeah. I had a lady try to sell my house. Her name was Delia. I wonder if she was related.
Did she give you a Delia?
I was trying to get a Delia. I was trying to get that number too, but it didn't work.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because she didn't feel you.
Yeah, but the deal was to steal you. So absolutely.
Oh.
These two twin daughters opened up a dress shop named after their mom. So you have the word Jackson. So this dress shop becomes Jackson Square Gifts and Desires, which is now basically known as the Port Orleans Gift Shop. So that's kind of the backstory of the gift shop.
And Jackson Square Gifts and Desires was named after Andrew Jackson. Just like Jackson Square.
Yeah, right.
They couldn't say that. They had to come up with a backstory and make it sound like, no, we're not referencing these these older slave owners or anything like that. We're talking about like happy elements of New Orleans.
Exactly.
That's right.
History.
That's right.
Yes. And we're going to get into, as time goes on, we're going to get into why a lot of this stuff was done away with and names were changed. And again, kind of like what we were talking about before, it's like New Orleans, but sanitized for your protection.
Exactly. Yep.
And hermetically sealed.
Yes. It needs to be. Yes.
So another part of the history of Port Orleans, New Orleans, jazz club, jazz music was very popular at the time.
Really?
Yeah, really, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
So they came up with Scats Cats Club was the name of the jazz club that was supposedly in Port Orleans, which is basically now the Port Orleans Lounge at the resort. So there's another little name for you, Scats Cats Club.
Scat Cats. Where did that name come from, Keith? You know?
It was just a jazz club that opened up in the city, and there was no backstory in that one.
Oh, I know, Danny. I know.
Okay.
It's Paula Abdul. No, it's not.
Kevin,
it's not Paula Abdul.
took 2 steps forward while Keith took 2 steps back.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. My bad.
By the way, Keith, Scat Cats is still open. By the way.
Yes, it is. It's the Port Orleans Lounge. Oh, you mean in New Orleans? Is there an actual Scat?
I mean, it's still called Scat Cats.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that was clear. Okay, good.
I think you meant to say, give me the bop, chibop, chibop, chibop. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because, all right, so, Kev, seriously, where does the name Scat Cat come from?
I know scatting is like the jazz, the little jazz vocalization language stuff, but I don't know if there's anything more to that, to be honest.
Okay, well, then I'm sorry. Maybe I stumbled across this one by accident. Okay,
it's not like the Aristocrats thing, is it? Like, because there's a lot of Aristocrats.
Yes, that's exactly. It's the Aristocats.
Oh.
Yes, Scat Cat is a character in the Aristocats, and then as you're going to see, and I'm sure Keith's going to get it too when we get into the pool area. The Aristocats pop up again and again here because the Aristocats. Well, that movie took place in France, so.
Oh yeah, because I read about the whole Bonne Familles thing.
Yeah, so Scat Cat was the lead cat of that little jazz group that they had, and who did the voice of Scat Cat? Anyone?
Scatman Crothers.
Thank you, E. Thank you, Eli. Scatman Crothers. So believe it or not, yes, technically there is a jazz club in Disney named after Scatman Crothers.
That's awesome.
In a roundabout way.
Awesome. That is a classic.
And just to connect it with everything, the Aristocats took place where?
In France.
In France, exactly. And New Orleans was part of the whole French colony. So yeah, it's all it's a big circle of life, as it were.
Right. So whereas it wasn't included as part of the official backstory, that's where the name came from. Because obviously this backstory was pieced together after everything was named. I promise you.
Yep.
I can believe that, yeah. Cool.
All right, so the next location, just bear with me a little bit for the little bit backstory on this one.
Okay.
So apparently there was a bakery called Cross Bakery, was founded by Mary Margaret Cross, hence the name Cross Bakery. So she retired as a nurse from London and settled in Port Orleans. She saw a street full of children beggars and decided to feed them. So over time, she basically was feeding the children, and then she decided to open up a bakery. Go figure.
Yeah.
So she also established a foundation for orphans, and one of the orphans that she took care of was named
Annie.
That's a different story. That's a different story, Danny.
Oh, sorry.
Wait, what? What?
We'll talk about that one tomorrow.
So much history.
So one of the orphans' names was Jacques Benet. So this Jacques Benet opened up his own pastry shop, and take a guess at what he sold.
Beignets.
Donuts.
He sold beignets.
Beignets.
Oh wait,
Beignets.
Oh, you mean like Eric Benet or Lisa?
No,
Benet?
like Lisa Bonet's son.
Yeah, all right, yeah, because it was Eric Benet. He was trying to go out with Halle Berry. I don't know if they made any cats though, but you mean like beignets? You talking about that? The donut? Like we used to cook. Kevin and I used to cook.
Yep, those are the ones.
Beignets.
Yeah.
He just has to smooth out his end a little bit.
I'm helping. It's like Orleans, yeah. Beignets. Okay.
Keith, if you can't tell, it's one of the New Orleanians' favorite pastimes is to give people from different states grief about their pronunciation of our terms. But you can't tell.
Figure that out pretty quickly. I wish I could think of a Philly term where you guys can mess up on, but I can't think of one right now. So maybe I'll have you guys try to order a cheesesteak, and we'll see how that goes later.
All right.
So cheesesteaks, can they have mushrooms on them?
Yeah.
What about onions?
Yeah.
See, I thought that was like some kind of contention that they couldn't have mushrooms on them.
I haven't heard that. We'll have to look that up one way.
With or without.
Yeah, there you go. All right, you guys know the lingo better than me. So beignets are sold at the Port Orleans, and that bakery is located in the Sascagoula Float Works and Food Factory, which is basically the food court. So there's the backstory to that bakery.
And a funny little thing here, again, for the Jack Beignet, that was a pun. That was a takeoff on a famous American comedian back in the day, Jack Benny.
Jack Benny.
Jack Benny.
Jack Benny. That's where the name came from. That's what I'm saying. The story was clearly put together after these things were named.
Wasn't there something about that she made hot cross buns or?
Yeah. That was part of her original bakery, hence the name Cross. Right, she made cross bun. Right, yeah, exactly.
There. Okay, cool.
And they were hot.
And crossed. And buns.
Your anaconda don't want none unless you got hot cross buns.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. Glad to hear that. All right. Yes. So Sascagoula Floatworks and Food Factory, just to kind of piggyback off of what Keith was saying, in addition to Jack Beignet's bakery, when it first opened, some of the other places that were available there, because all these names have kind of been lost to history. So just to kind of give them a little due respect, Preservation Pizza Company, the King Creole Broiler, and Basin Street Burgers and Chicken. Those were, because now none of these places have names anymore. They're just food
court.
Right, yep. Exactly. But they did have names at one point in time, so just to kind of give that a little bit of love.
Well, in talking about the food factory, Disney actually kind of, once again, Danny, another thing that's been kind of lost to time. Originally, it was themed to be a Mardi Gras float factory, kind of like Blaine Kern's Mardi Gras World. So I don't know if you guys ever remember when you visited, it had these big, giant, elaborate masks and props hanging from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Everywhere, yeah, absolutely.
And also all the chairs were a bunch of kind of mismatched chairs to kind of make it look like kind of a factory. So apparently a couple years ago, I don't know if people were complaining about it, but when they did they obviously did a modification and, renovated it. And it's now just kind of looks like a generic food cart with a couple little minor theming. So they kind of got away from that big Mardi Gras kind of theme.
Oh, yeah, it's a food court.
Yeah, they genericized it now, which is unfortunate.
And all the chairs are the same, so.
It's a little weird. I mean, but that's a part of the theming, I guess. Like, what did they say? What made them just eventually change it like that? Or just like, was it too expensive to keep up with all that?
No, I think as time has gone on, these kind of, again, you saw this with Grand Floridian, where so much has changed that the story just is disjointed and really doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore. And I think that's what happens is as time goes on, things change, and now you lose these stories, and so it's not as important that all this stuff kind of fits together anymore. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like this is a Disney thing that they're doing, or is it more like people just don't care about that stuff in general? Like most people are just like, I just want to get on Splash Mountain, like they don't care about the backstory and Main Street and the windows and all that kind of stuff? Or is it just that Disney doesn't want to continue to have to keep up with the story?
I think the casual fans, I think you're right. They don't care. They're there. They look around. Oh, cool stuff. But they never take the time to really understand where you're sitting at. What is the story that's being conveyed here? Either that or it's just happening on a subliminal level or something. But hardcore Disney fans, they know this stuff and they look for this stuff. Sure. And they appreciate this stuff. And that's kind of what keeps you going with Disney. So as little by little it erodes away and disappears and is lost, I think you lose a little bit of the magic that goes along with it that makes it stand out over, say, a Universal Studios.
Right. Yeah, and that kind of goes along with the whole idea where you no longer have like a learning Epcot where you can go to a place where you can learn. People just don't want to do that, when they're on vacation. Mm-hmm. But that's a story for another day.
Yes, it is.
So let's jump around here. Let's talk about the pool area.
All right.
Yes.
So the pool area is called Doubloon Lagoon. So that's obviously a play on words, which are doubloons are giving out Mardi Gras parades, right? Mm-hmm. Right, guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So the signature attraction at the pool area is a bluest sea creature water slide with a Triton-type figure at the head of the water slide. So I actually have two different backstories for the serpent that's actually the water slide at the pool area. Mm-hmm. And the name of the sea serpent is called Scales the Sea Serpent.
Scales?
Scale.
Scales, huh?
Scale.
Okay.
Scales.
Yeah, there's an E there.
Scales, like
right?
fish scales.
Scale. Okay.
Like musical scales.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was thinking fish scales, but okay. That makes more sense.
Well,
the
pronunciation is the same.
Both levels.
Yeah.
Music has scales. Music has scales.
Parfaits, people call it parfaits.
So Scales was an original Disney.
Who doesn't like scales?
Yeah. Jump in the pool.
So Scales was an original Disney character created for the resort by Disney executive Greg Ibar, who worked for Disney marketing. So the Port Orleans French Quarter once had a full-service restaurant, which is now sadly closed, and called, and once again, here's another pronunciation, Bonne
famille.
What does it mean?
Good family.
Good family.
Good family.
Bonne famille. Bonne and famille.
Like if you're dating a girl, you'd be like, "Oh man, she come from that bon famille."
Yeah. That's
Good girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Going to church. Yeah.
So Bonne Familles was named after the this was named after in reference to the owner of the talented French cats in the Aristocats. So basically after opera singer Madame Bonfamille.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Madame Bonfamille.
Madame Bonfamille.
Bonfamille.
And in the restaurant there was a special children's menu, which was basically a coloring book. And this talked about the cats from the Aristocats, Madame Duchess and the Kittens, and Thomas O'Malley, and the Alley Cat Band, which took a musical cruise from Paris, because that's where we talked about earlier the Aristocats were from. So they took a musical cruise from Paris to Port Orleans, where they were tailed, quote-unquote, followed by a jazz-loving sea serpent.
Oh, kind of like your boy in Princess and the Frog.
Right, and this is where the story gets a little funny. So the sea creature fell in love with the jazz music that Scat Cat and his band were playing during the voyage. So the sea creature was named Scales, a nod to musical scales, and the Sherman Brothers tune from that film, Scales and Archipelagos.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, nice.
So the story goes with Scales staying at the resort to enjoy the music played by the resident jazz gators. So if you kind of remember, kind of in the Doubloon Lagoon area, there's these little alligators which are kind of outside the pool area. So that's kind of what that's referencing.
The idea being that, like the jazz gators are kind of like some kind of like Pied Pipers that led Scales to the pool area. Just as if you follow the gators today, they'll lead you right to the pool area. That was what this guy was hinting at. I don't think that's why the jazz gators were placed where they were. I think that was this guy looking at this Imagineer looking at it, creating this children's menu, and said, "Oh, well, here's the story. This is what happened." Just like as Keith was about ready to get to, another guy looked at this exact same scenario and said, "I got a better idea for how this sea serpent came to be. That would fit into my backstory of Port Orleans."
Actually, Danny, do you want to talk about this one? Since I'll take my version versus your version and see which one the other guys like best.
Oh, it's like we're picking sides here.
Yeah, so it's kind of like battle of the backstory for Scales the sea serpent, right? Yeah,
yours has cartoon cats and gators.
Yeah, but I kind of like the other one better. But we'll see what the guys think. Yeah, we'll see. Let's see what the guys think.
You want to compete with him, but you already said you like his story more than the story you just told?
Well, yeah, but I have the Aristocats behind me in my corner, Hey, I'm from Philly. We have Rocky here, so don't go get the Rocky guy.
I do love some Rocky.
Louisiana's got per capita the most alligators, and if an alligator gets into the water, it's game over. Just FYI. Oh, that's funny that you have a serpent leading you to the pool. So
Are you really okay? You want me to do it?
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah. Should we set this up? Battle of Scales the sea serpent. Keith's version versus Danny's. The main event.
I didn't even know I was playing this.
I thought y'all planned it. I wanted to ask Keith, in your version, really quick, does Scales do any does he do any dancing in the backstory? Does he play an instrument? Does he pick up an instrument since he's inspired by the music
basically, Eli, so he's kind of a big fan of the jazz music, and he kind of follows the Aristocats who go on this musical cruise from Paris, and they wind up in Port Orleans, and then there's these costume alligators right around the pool area playing musical instruments, and that kind of leads him to the pool area, and that's kind of where he lives to this day with little kids sliding down his back into the pool.
He loves that.
Right.
He's like Michael Jackson.
You have a happy, jazz-loving sea serpent hanging out the pool area.
Go down, but go down slow.
So I'm the kid-friendly version, and Danny's going to turn it into the dark side evil version.
Oh, the more New Orleans version. Okay.
Right. This is a little bit darker version.
All right. Well, let's go dark.
All right, let's get dark. So as Kevin was saying, one of the things about New Orleans that you have problems with is gators. I mean, if they get you, game over. So some of the dangers that exist when you go around these bayous is that there's going to be alligators, there's going to be snakes. And so the parents, part of their job was to try and keep the kids away from the bayou. And telling them, hey, just stay away. Of course, kids are disobedient. It's not going to work. They're going to go in. They're going to try and swim and do that kind of stuff. So they decided to concoct a story about this large serpentine creature that lurked beneath the surface of the dark water, waiting to eat children. Woo! Like, as if gators weren't bad enough, you need a large serpentine, dragon-like Loch Ness creature in order to scare these kids. So since the kids, they hear the story, they're like, no, we don't believe in all that. That's just nonsense. So a group of dads got together and decided to scare them by making like a large dragon-like sea serpent out of fence wire and bed sheets. And then they like painted it. And when it was finished, like 16 men got together to operate this thing. And when the children arrived on the bayou, the serpent emerged howling and screaming and chasing the children all the way back down to town. So each year afterwards, the serpent reappeared at the end of the Mardi Gras parade, reminding children to stay away from the bayou or else Scales would get you. And eventually Scales became a permanent fixture over at the Balloon Lagoon.
That's right. All those dads watch plenty of kung fu movies in order to master the art of dragon dancing.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
Well, there you go. So you tell me, what do you think is the better backstory for Scales? That he was eating children, or that he just happened to be swinging along and heard some music on a boat and decided to follow it?
I don't know. Mine's more kid friendly here. Children, so depends on if you just want to be nice or mean.
Well, I gotta tell you. Based upon how the Cajuns do Mardi Gras, I would go for the Danny's version because that seems more realistic as to what they would actually do.
Yeah, if I had I mean, they both are good. I mean, if I had a 3-year-old and I wanted to keep them happy, I'd tell them Keith's version. But now having a teenager that wanted to sneak out or something like that, I would tell them Danny's version. So it's all about the kid that you bring, but. Ooh, boy, that's an effective story. Yeah. Well,
that's a good point, because like if you're a kid, you're sitting there coloring your little children's menu and you're like, yay, Scales is so friendly. And he came over here and he just wanted to play and listen to music and everything. And then all of a sudden they get older and they're like, yeah, no, Scales wants to eat you.
I just told you that. Save you from what Scales really is, baby. But now that you're old enough, you want to find me. About to tell you. Me and some daddies got together and we made sure this thing would eat children.
Like all these years I've been sliding down that damn thing's back.
That's like secretly was waiting to turn around and eat your ass, but I was looking at it at the same time. Said, Scales, don't you do it. Don't you eat that kid while she being good.
So it just goes to show you, man, like even back in the day, things were a little disjointed at Disney where like one hand didn't necessarily know what the other hand was doing, where it's like, okay, you're working on the kids menu. Oh, okay, well, I'll just come up with a story that explains this sea creature here and we'll use him because it's kind of a kiddie thing. We have gators and we have Aristocats, and another person comes right in, has no idea what's going on. It's like, yeah, I'm going to create my own story as well. And it just kind of, it's kind of cool that there was just somebody out there whose job it was to just walk in there, have no idea why these things were there, just that they were put there, and came up with a backstory behind it. I like that.
Yeah, good job, Stephen King. Good job. Good job.
So I just wanted to touch on two other things with Port Orleans before we kind of jump into the Dixie Landings history.
Sure. Touch away.
So you know how you kind of not drive around, but you walk around Port Orleans and they have those horse-drawn carriage rides that you can do?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So supposedly as the town developed, horse and carriage was used to get around town, and apparently they still evident today with the horse and carriage rides. So that's why they're kind of still there, because that was kind of the mode of transportation back when the town was developing. And it's a way for now tourists to, spend dollars and do sightseeing and, whatever. So
for a very affordable $55.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
$55.
Affordable, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. That come with a meal?
Now the meal's another $15.
Horse farts. That's what it comes with.
So as the town developed, steamboat was used to travel upriver of the Sassagoula River, and riverboats were used to travel upstream to a nearby town called Dixie Landings.
Yeah.
So there's kind of your little connection between the two resorts.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah.
And the one other New Orleans reference I wanted to bring to the Port Orleans is, and I'm sure Lee has kind of booked a guest here, is so after the Princess and the Frog movie came out, didn't they kind of renovate some rooms and they kind of made them, I think they call them the Royal Rooms?
Yeah, the Royal Rooms now, I'm going to not want to put my foot in my mouth, but I think the Royal Rooms were around before Princess Tiana.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do know that now they do have Princess Tiana elements in them. Either way, they took this area of the resort and they rethemed the inside to what they call the Royal Rooms. And they're not necessarily princess rooms because they've got different elements from different stories. And they've got like little gold ornate things, and they've got like the water faucets, and they've got a headboard that lights up, and it's just, very, very nice for a little something extra that you don't normally find at moderate resorts.
And you're paying extra for it.
Mm-hmm. You are paying extra for it, and you're paying extra for a location that's not as desirable. Just kind of like the same thing with the pirate rooms, but
and that's how they sold it.
Yeah. But if you want something, a little fun, a little extra for your trip, it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about the lobby, Keith?
Yeah, let's talk about the lobby for a minute.
Yeah, because before we move on to Dixie Landings, I think that was a good one to touch upon.
Yeah, so the lobby is called Port Orleans Square. So it's the main facilities building. And it has, the Mardi Gras colors. And when I actually went and visited with, I was meeting Sean, I actually walk in and there was a guy kind of, dressed very like Mardi Gras-ish. And he actually put beads around my neck. And I didn't need to do anything for it. So kind of go figure there. Not like the real New Orleans, didn't need to show anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, the lobby has a fountain in it. And, a lot of wrought iron, a lot of kind of glass, and kind of at the top, kind of entrance of the doorway is a court jester overhead. And there's also a couple images of these giant gold doubloons.
Yeah.
Funny thing, they actually gave me beads to keep my shirt on.
Wow.
They gave you all the throws, huh? They gave you doubloons, cups, spears, beads, everything.
Beads, teddy bears. They offer you razors to shave your beard. You wouldn't take it.
But yeah, no, the original theme of the lobby was that of a commercial bank. And it was referred to as the Port Orleans Mint before they did that refurbishment in 2013. And once again, it's like this long, complicated backstory, so it's not really worth it to go into it. But I mean, they had to do something like a Spanish governor seeing the need for both a mint and a bank all at once, and the French currency was no longer of any use because now Spain had acquired the Port Orleans territory. I mean, just to kind of give you some kind of a sense as to how they worked this backstory just to get so many of the different cultures that helped create New Orleans into there. But when France then reacquired the territory, that mint was brought back to producing francs, along with a special commemorative coins from Mardi Gras called doubloons. And incidentally enough, one of the things that I found fascinating when I was researching this, because one of the things that is famous about New Orleans is the term, and it was used in the name of the second resort, which is Dixie Landings. Now, we got three New Orleanians on the show. Dixie, who knows where that term comes from?
It's from the French term for dix, which is $10 bill. That's
exactly it. What Kevin just said, dix, which was a $10 bill. And so the mint that they put there, which was based on an original turn of the century mint, was where farmers used to go to trade in their harvest for dixies, which was a $10 bill. When the farmers went and gave them their goods, and they would get their dixies in return. So they'd be like, I'm going to get my dixie. So they didn't even know that they ended up coining a phrase, but that's where the name Dixie comes from. Now, when we get to the actual story, they're going to have a whole different explanation for how they came up with the name Dixie Landings. But Dixie itself, just in case anybody was wondering, that's the where that term originated from farmers used to go to the mint to go ahead and exchange in their goods for money. And so that's why I thought the use of a mint as a lobby was kind of cool.
Yeah, a couple of things with that. So, just to relate, it's kind of like today when you say, I'm going to go get a buck, or the farmer's going to say, I'm going to get some bookies. But no, not really. That's not true. But what I really wanted to say is, like, there's an actual mint in New Orleans. They call it the Old U.S. Mint. And it was an actual mint for the United States that was printing coin between 1838 and 1909. And so, yeah, there's definitely connections there between the resort and there, because we both have mints. Maybe something a little different. Yep.
And it's like a jazz museum now, right?
Yeah, it's like a museum. It's a performance venue now. The building still exists. The actual building itself, it's definitely part of Louisiana State Museum system. So yeah, it does a lot of different things. Well, guys, we hope you enjoyed that discussion of the Port Orleans Resort. If you want to learn more about us and our New Orleans-ness, MagicOurWay.com is the way to go. There you'll find our social media links, past episodes, and more. You can also get in touch with us through the following ways to share your opinion. You can shoot us an email at show@magicourway.com, leave us a voicemail via our SpeakPipe widget, or you can call or leave us a text message. Yes, I did say text at 1-815-MOWEEKEN. That's 1-815-
Moweekend.
669-4226. And of course, we got a couple guys that do things outside of the podcast. First of all, we got Eli, does things for comics. Eli, tell them what you got going on, sir.
Oh, of course. You know the story. It's all about the glory. You can visit our website, Ivory Comics, where you can check out the artwork I'm putting out for Project Geisha, Savages and the Molly Be Damned. There's also blog posts and interviews, and of course, a link to this podcast so you can never miss an episode. If you want to find me on Facebook, I can be found at Eli H. Ivory, always making new friends as long as they're real people. You can also check out Project Geisha on Facebook, so facebook.com/Project Geisha. Instagram, I'm out there as well. You can find me there at eIvory504. And of course, on Twitter, I can be found at Hancock10166. So if you appreciate the madness, and he's bringing me to Gladys. Thank you very much.
And if you want to book a vacation for the upcoming time in which we can start traveling and getting together socially again, you can do so through Lee of Magical Moments Vacations. Lee, tell them how to do this.
Just give me a call at 832-431-1621. That's 832-POUPON. 832-POUPON. You can email me at lee@magicourway.com. You can check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/LostToVicaTravel. Instagram, you can find me at You've Got a Friend in Lee Travel. And if you do any of that, we'll get you hooked up and booked up with no.
Hasselvika!
Is there an 800 number for 1-800 I don't know when I can go to Disney.com or something? Like, is there something we can copyright?
We should.
1-800 June 1st, hopefully.
I don't know.
Can I tell you, you know what we need to do? We need to do an old-fashioned, like, football pool where people predict the date
you get a square.
Disney's going to open. And whoever gets...
That'd be awesome.
Whoever gets closest. Yeah. And not that we would do this for money. We would do it for, like, jelly beans or something or whatever, because we can't talk about doing it for money on a podcast. But, like, you know, for Skittles or something like that, we'll do a contest, you know, not for money.
For a T-shirt?
Yeah, for a t-shirt or something, where if you're the one who's able to predict the opening date closest and most accurately, you win the prize.
That'd be fun.
Something.
Yeah, I'd be down with that. Yeah,
That'd be fun. All right.
that'd be fun. Yeah, let's look into that. Maybe Weekends, what do you think about that? Let us know for sure. Absolutely.
Game on.
Yeah. How many gamblers are out there?
Oh, they can't tell
Ton.
you because the bookies are looking for them.
That's right. Look, guys, if you want to support the show as a whole, you can do so through the following ways. Buy some beignets right there on our homepage. Buy some clothing from our shop. Remember, we're a part of the BS Podcast Network, so support those guys over there. Then, easiest way to support us is to leave a rating and a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download the show, whether it is Stitcher, Blueberry, Google Play Music, etc. And look, guys, on Facebook, we got a group, the Mohican Pleasure Island 33 Facebook group. There you can speak your Disney mind without fear of any retribution. You can interact with all the famous Mohicans, as well as Danny, Eli, V, and yours truly.
Also, guys, one of the good things about being on Mohican Pleasure Island 33 is that if we're going to be doing something that involves the listeners, we're going to be posting it on Mohican Island 33. So if it's like we're going to do 10 minutes with a Mohican, if we're going to do a game show, it's always going to be posted there. So if y'all want to be a part of the behind the scenes magic of the Magic Our Way podcast, if y'all want to get in good with the host and be like, hey, I got an idea for a show, that's the best way to get in touch with us. Mohican Pleasure Island 33.
That's right. And guys, look, we always thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to us and making us a part of your Disney fan life. We appreciate you and love hearing from our listeners. All opinions are always welcome on this podcast, so get in touch with us today. So Mohicans, ladies and gentlemen, we say Kwaherini. My name is Kevin.
And I'm Danny.
Magic out.
I have every intention of eating those bananas for breakfast, but I still somehow end up with tacos.
Beignets.
Hey, this is Kevin from the Magic Our Way podcast. When Calgon can't take me away, Mad Hatter Radio will. Check it out.
Bam.